According to Fiona Bruce on BBC's Antiques Roadshow some time ago, the British Industrial Revolution made British people wealthy almost overnight. Well, we can't blame Ms Bruce for her trite, vacuous comment, since she was simply trolling out the official sanitised version of British, or rather English history that the BBC has recently adopted. A version of English history that has replaced the sordid, brutal reality of life in Old England with a new, glossy, sexy account in which almost every vestige of the atrocities committed by British politicians, British judges and the illustrious captains of British industry against their own people have been removed. What's left is a work of pure fiction, sanitised enough to be dished out as historical fact to future generations of naive English children and the millions of new British immigrants who now live in England. What we know for certain is that hundreds of thousands of academics, journalists, students, researchers, public servants et al. Have been given grants amounting to hundreds of millions of pounds to analyse the merits and demerits of the wonderful British Industrial Revolution. By far the majority of it is detached, insensitive academic claptrap that seeks to justify the suffering of millions of white English slaves for the greater good of Britain and the world. And the suffering did not happen overnight, but was institutionalised for well over a century. The irony is that all of this historical cleansing and academic research has been funded almost entirely by the descendants of the indigenous English working people whom the British rich and powerful abused in the first place. This is how the glorious British Industrial Revolution really was, as seen through ethnic English eyes. In 1750, the average life expectancy of a Lancashire male was 52. By 1850, thanks to the British Industrial Revolution, it had shrunk to 42. Their natural right to 70 slashed by 1/3 by the British rich and powerful. I know now that in the early to mid-1800s my Lancashire ancestors lived and died in squalor. They would have suffered the miseries of a 2-up 2-down terraced slum, one of 30 slums that stood cheek by jowl on their street. There would have been an open sewer running down the middle that was infested with vermin, and each slum would have housed up to 25 people and had no privy. Their employers, by the way, were also their landlords. The British ruling classes did not want me to know this, because the British ruling classes caused it, and they did little to change things for well over half a century. They also did not want me to know that between 1800 and 1850, 3 million English people died from tuberculosis. In the same period, at least 1 million English people died from cholera, and typhus, typhoid and dysentery killed another million. In 1850, infant mortality in Lancashire was 1 in 3. Few people in rural employment died from any of these diseases. So over 50 years, the Industrial Revolution caused the premature deaths of more than 5 million English people. Since the Industrial Revolution lasted over 100 years, the final total was probably well in excess of this number. In 1850, trade unions were illegal, and only 4% of people could vote. From 1780 to 1870, the British government and British judiciary transported their own people to America or Australia for life. Many for simply stealing food to avoid starvation. The British finally ended transportation 20 years after the abolition of the slave trade to America, by which time they had transported more than 100,000 ethnic English men, women and children. It is unsurprising, but entirely disgraceful, that the British establishment elected to rewrite its involvement in ethnic English history to suit its own requirements.